you sports connoisseurs just jumped in, and I wanted to.
My bad, man. My bad.
Whoa. I mean, I don't want to dampen the mood, but I'd like to enter into the conversation on the aspect of sports that I find most fascinating. And the aspects of sports that I find fascinating, because as someone who is a student of Black politics and Black political history, is I find it fascinating how American sports, particularly football and basketball, are, for large segments of American society, the only avenue they have to look upon particularly Black men with some form of admiration. Mm-hmm. And how in this particular state that we're in America, in the age of wokeness, the post-Trump era, the rise of reactionary nationalism, with the long protracted history of race in sports, particularly in my lifetime, right? Because in the 60s, we had this kind of idyllic image of the athlete, the striving, noble athlete standing up for the civil rights movement. We had Jim Brown, we had Martin Luther King, all of them dapperly dressed. They represented, college educated. They were eloquent spokesmen, etc., so on and so forth. And then we go into the 80s and we see the hyper capitalization of all cultural production. With sports, you see, $1 million Black athletes, so on and so forth. And with the proliferation of urban culture vis-a-vis hip hop, right, we start to get this new kind of class dynamic coming into athletics, where we got the b-boy athlete. And there's an immediate kind of blowback that you see, like starting with like the Fab Five and all of these athletes who are into hip hop, Allen Iverson. And it's just a fascinating trajectory of how race, class, and popular culture categorize this whole group of Black men who are basically a different form of entertainers of the majority of Americans, who, for the large part, 5 years after their peak entertainment, almost all go broke.
Hold on, guys, 1 second. I want to just introduce our third guest, special super guest, and definitely if anybody on the panel wants to ask him any questions while we got him, let's do that, because I don't get to see this man much anymore, being that even he lives down the street from me. Black ass. This is my best friend, brother.
Oh man.
I have no more words to say other than this is a good dude. This is Coach Will of Oakland High.
What's up with
Will,
do you want to answer that question Pascal had?
What was the question? Which one?
Oh man!
Which one?
Maybe Matt can hit it off, then I'll take it. Then we'll have an idea kind of where we're going with it. Yeah.
I was switching from my phone to my laptop.
No, it's all good. I think once Matt answers it, I answer
the basic question is that in light of the way Black athletes, particularly Black men, are used in sports as a means of entertainment, and how sports provides pretty much the only avenue for which the majority of Americans who are white can look up at Black men with some form of esteem. How do we interpret the fact that after 5 years at best of being at the pinnacle of this position of spectacle, most of the athletes, particularly the Black ones, are broke after that time? They have no money. They have no value. What does that say about the way in which capitalism, class, race, color intertwine with sports? Does it say something about sports? Does it say something about capitalism? Does it say something about these athletes?
My opinion, my amateur opinion, I think that a lot of it comes down to, I mean, with capitalism, your labor is replaceable, and so it doesn't benefit the owners to have, an educated workforce. The crazy thing about it is, I think unintentionally, especially in basketball, with the salary cap and the maximum contracts, once you take away your yearly salary as your main incentive, a lot of the last 5 to 10 years of basketball players have started kind of being groomed to be businessmen. So I don't think they're as socially adept as far as some of the social issues that I would want them to be. But you see, like your LeBrons. I know when Dame told me about the rookie symposium they have every year. His agent actually told me this. Agent is actually an Oakland High grad also, from '82 or whatever it was. But he was basically saying, like, in the past, guys are falling asleep when the speakers are speaking, and kind of going through the motions. Even the guest speakers are going through the motions. And he said, like, that 2012 rookie symposium, like, he had never seen so many notebooks, laptops. Speakers were like, staying an extra 30, 40 minutes answering questions, and they were like legit questions. So I think the athletes going broke thing is not going to be as much of a factor in basketball, especially. Football is
right.
The union has no leverage, the workers have no leverage. With basketball, I mean, the last time the owners were talking about locking out the players, and the players were kind of like, well, we're just going to go around in the summertime and play in these gyms. And they're seeing how they're drawing 8,000-9,000 fans to watch them play pickup games. It's kind of like, well, we could literally just rent our own gyms, and I think the lower end of the players would probably suffer a little more initially, but then you had guys like Chris Paul and LeBron talking about, well, if they lock us out, we've got enough funds to put into this escrow account to help out some of these younger players that aren't on guaranteed contracts to make it through. But yeah, I mean, I don't even think if I answered that question all the way. That's what you get with the internet.
He's describing the reality well. I mean, but Matt, you want to hop in though? I feel bad. Yeah, I don't. Why don't you?
I just feel like
I'll take it back up to you.
Yeah, I just feel like the left wing thing to say is like it's about ownership, right? We talk. There's a confusion that gets made a lot in political media between high income people and the people who really own a lot of the wealth in society. And of course, high income people need to be taxed, but fundamentally, the wealth needs to be owned in some kind of equitable way. And I see Steve Ballmer on the sidelines of Clippers games, and it's like, I like Kawhi and Paul George, and all of a sudden, like, they do something good, I have to look at Steve Ballmer, like, gesticulating on the sideline. And until we get rid of those guys, I feel like
but Matt, they got rid of Donald Sterling, though. They got rid of Donald Sterling.
Right.
Steve Ballmer, you got to be happy.
Listen, I mean, this is a question. This is a question I kind of follow up, if you don't mind. Jason, I want you to jump in on this also, right?
Sure.
As people, and I assume we're all kind of like on the left, and what that means is that basically we have a chat. We have a critique of capitalism, imperialism, racism, and sexism. I think that's fair to say about all of us, right? That we realize that those at least those four things are kind of at a root of the problem in American society. And we also, I think we know as people who tend to be on the left, is that we don't have, there are a lot fewer of people on our side than there are liberals and conservatives. That being said, the same way Jason and I talk about how one of the frailties of the left is its anti-religiosity in its ability to reach large segments of American society, particularly African Americans, Black Americans, who a lot of them are church-going people.
Yeah,
there is an anti-athleticism, intellectual superiority complex. Anti-athleticism, intellectual superiority complex on the left. Many people on the left poo-poo sports and athletics as a reactionary, bourgeois distraction. And also brutal.
I'm fired up. I'm fired up, man. I got a lot to say.
And basically see sports as the playground of the reactionaries in American society. How do we deal with that?
No, hey, I got to jump in on this because there's the things that contextualize this. Like there's that discourse has existed a very long time. There's a lot of problematic elements to it. I mean, I think some of it, I see it. I think back to my college experience being at like South Carolina, Florida State, seeing big Division I programs. The way in which like some of the professors like really like look down on like the athletes, like the unpaid athletes that are there under this system, really driving the engine for this college and not being compensated. A lot of them first generation kids plucked right out the hood purely because of their ability to come in and benefit the program, right? It's a systemic thing. So like the commodification of Black masculinity, but then the accompanying like idea and like the repulsion with which like of that same Black masculinity by like because there are, I mean, whatever they want to say, it's not just Black masculinity. It's like it's the overall American like culture. These influences that go into it, but it's sort of like there's I hate that there's like, what are they doing here? What are these like? Why are they in the resentment that they're there instead of recognizing that this society is built upon. They weren't the one. The society is built upon the fundamental exploitation of them. I mean, you look at like the college football industry, you look at the stands at the University of Alabama, you look at like a big game at Auburn or Clemson or out in the West Coast at USC at the Coliseum when they're humming. And it's an overwhelmingly majority white crowd. And it's built on the backs of like overwhelmingly majority Black labor. And what we talked about tonight, the whole thing of gentrification in sports, and we're seeing it play out. The hollowing out of the public sector across the board, and sport is a microcosm of that. You have a totally different like reality and consciousness of the players with the helmets on, going out running on that field. Yeah, they like the thrill of the arena, the spectacle, like the crowd getting hyped, but they also like go into a little sign autographs, the fan day stuff. I mean, guys, there's an alienation that is real because they don't like connect on that level. To them, it is like they understand what it is, but it's something that's not like a game in the sense of just like, hey, I'm going out here to have fun. I'm going to college. And there's not enough done to really dig into those class distinctions and the role like race and class play in creating that, and like the reproduction of labor within all major sports. I just think that we got to recognize with players not to like be too much of an apologist for guys who make bad statements and whatnot, but let's give shout outs to like Jaylen Brown, Justin Jackson right now. I mean, Jackson, I think, is really doing a lot in terms of being principled on calling out people on across the aisle that aren't using leverage to fight for the people and like making it less about personality politics. I think guys like him could be influential. He came at Northwestern on the heels of the movement they had to unionize the football team there. There's a lot more going on. You look at a Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics and like his political education. I think it's about reaching out. David West and the way he's been able to like really push back against like
pretty good.
Yeah, new Cold War narratives like there, and he's got influence with a lot of young guys. So I mean, there's reasons to be pessimistic all across the board, but there is like Coach Will alluded to it. Yeah, on the business side of it, I don't think there are going to be as many guys going broke. I think guys are much savvier. There's not as much of a focus on just being the dumb jock. They project that label. They want to be seen as multiple. A lot of these guys. So there's a mix. You still have some of that like guys that fit that sort of dumb jock stereotype, but it's really not just that, and it is problematic. Then where that discourse comes from on the left of this like feeling that all this sport is just fundamentally reactionary when it's such a huge part of Black culture in the South where I grew up. The Pop Warner football parks, the basketball courts, like the playing ball, and the idea that that's just you got to understand people actually want to play the games. It's not this like capitalism. It's fucked up. It's like, but some people act like they're just like, I don't know. So, yeah, jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of look at the difference between like, Richard Sherman talking about D1 players versus like, if you go to like a D2 or a D3 basketball game, if you go to like a high-end D1 game, guys are, players are plastered all over the wall. They're not choosing their classes. They're choosing classes around their practice and travel schedule and what it's going to take to keep their, the API in line so the coach doesn't lose any money or get fired. And then you have like, they're treated like celebrities. The students there to watch them play are fans. They're not classmates. Whereas you go to a D2 game And after the
Mhm.
game, you literally see like, a player's like science study group be like, "Oh, you were so good."
Yeah,
Or like,
that's
"Yeah,
facts.
when are we gonna meet to do the lab or whatever it is?" And it's a totally different dynamic, and comes down to that money thing.
To hear the rest of this show and more, you can find us at This Is Revolution Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, Pandora, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, you can find a new episode every Wednesday on the Zero Books YouTube channel. This is Revolution.